Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. Let me introduce you to Dr. Ilia Kolochenko. Dr. Kolochenko is the CEO of ImmuniWeb. That's I-M-M-U-N-I Web, W-E-B. Dr. Kolochenko, Ilia, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. Um, let's start off with a little bit, Ilia, I'm going to call you Ilia if it's okay. Ilia, let's start off with a little bit about you. Right? You're PhD, CEO of ImmuniWeb, thought leader in the space. Tell us a little bit about your story, your life story, if you don't mind.
Certainly. So probably my story is not very usual because I'm a cybersecurity professional. I've been in cybersecurity practice for about 20 years. That's another way to say that I'm an old man.
I got you beat, so go easy.
Right. And actually, when I was in my 30s, I decided to start studying law, and I became a lawyer. And basically speaking, today I'm an attorney. My practice is mostly focused on complex cyber law cases or cases that involve cybercrime investigations. And I also have a pleasure and privilege to lead amazing technical teams at ImmuniWeb. In a nutshell, what we do, we're a global application security company headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. We also have regional offices in London, Washington, D.C., and Dubai. And we provide cybersecurity services to more than 1,000 enterprise customers from 50 plus countries.
Really? That's interesting. So I did the opposite. I went to law first, hated it, and then got into technology. And that was about, Jesus, 35 maybe years ago, maybe more. And never looked back. Though, what you learn in law, it always stays with you, right? It's the way of looking at things, a way of thinking about things, way of approaching problems. Um, but cybersecurity has become one of those areas where having a law degree is a good thing, right? Because the line between legal, illegal, wrong, you know, morally wrong versus legally wrong is often there's a wider gulf than one would think, right? Um, so it's an interesting thing. So you didn't found ImmuniWeb, or you did?
I did.
You founded ImmuniWeb to kind of be the vehicle around this whole law thing, or did the law thing come after?
I would say probably it happened simultaneously, but at the ImmuniWeb, we're certainly not a law firm, so we don't provide legal services.
Right.
However, we have a lot of different products where we help our customers to better understand, for example, their regulatory duties relating to cybersecurity, data protection, privacy, incident response. Now we have a lot of different products relating to security and safety of artificial intelligence products and technologies. So basically speaking, we are a pure tech firm, but we try to provide some additional insights to our customers. We're not competing with lawyers, not at all, but we try to bring in a certain areas that usually stay in darkness and nobody cares till they have a lawsuit. We try to bring them to our customers saying, listen, probably you should look at this specific item because it might trigger an issue, and probably talk to your general counsel. So we try to put the cherry on the cake.
Got it. Excellent. You mentioned artificial intelligence, AI. I mean, these last couple of weeks have just been historic in what we're seeing the AI starting to do now. Probably application security, AppSec, has been one of the most impacted domains from AI, the release of Claude Opus and finding all these vulnerabilities in open source projects. The idea that not only is AI helping you generate the code, but it's actually testing code. It's testing code as good as some of the best, SaaS or I don't want to say DAS yet, but certainly static tests out there. And a lot of people are, foretelling and contemplating and pontificating, maybe is a better word, on what the future of application security is in an AI world here, right? Where not only does it write the code, but tests the code and potentially fixes the code, right? And that's it's a lot of responsibility to put in front of what's still a pretty unproven, I think, technology. I'm wondering from where you sit, where do you see that, Dr. Kolochenko?
So I believe that my position and my view on the future of artificial intelligence have been consistent since 2019. This is actually when at ImmuniWeb we received our first international award for practical use of machine learning and AI. So it was before the launch of Chat GPT. And basically speaking, my opinion is still the same. So AI is an amazing tool for lawyers, for engineers, for penetration testers, for many other people. It is an amazing tool, but that's it. I don't think that artificial intelligence will ever be able to fully replace human experts. I acknowledge that in many organizations, we had too many people doing redundant tasks for some good or bad reasons. And currently, we also see what we call AI washing, when a lot of people are being fired under the pretext of AI automation. But in reality, organizations actually never needed this kind of roles internally. And with this AI trend, they start rethinking, reviewing, and actually deciding, saying, well, if we can do this task with a team of two, why actually we had 25 people, 7 supervisors, 3 additional supervisors, and the entire team of technical support? We just don't need it. And talking about practical implications of artificial intelligence, some people say that AI will replace virtually everybody. All right. But the challenge is that if you don't understand an output of AI tool or solution, being it a complicated M&A contract, for example, or source code of a sufficiently complicated, sufficiently sophisticated software, if you as a lawyer or non-lawyer or as an engineer or non-IT person, you don't understand it, you will probably have a contract that will do exactly the opposite of what you initially contemplated to do. Same with the software. If you just copy paste output from ChatGPT or Claude, you will probably create unreliable software, to put it mildly. So we still need human experts to understand, to utilize AI, because we cannot just say, listen, I want to create a Microsoft Office. We will not have it. We may have a beautiful web user interface or things like that, but the truth is that behind Microsoft Office, we have millions of hours of qualified human labor and work. And we cannot just create it with vibe coding or however we call it now, right? Same with the contract. AI may create a one size fits all contract. In my experience, that's the best way to do you insert something to draft a contract, to create an agreement, to settle, and now we are being sued or we are willing to sue. So amusingly, use of AI to fully replace lawyers actually brings more work to lawyers. So I would suggest using AI if you're a lawyer, if you are an engineer, if you're a penetration tester. It will certainly accelerate a lot of things. It will certainly intelligently automate many time-consuming but not very exciting tasks and processes. It will boost your productivity, but it's not here to replace you. And last thing, probably from the technical viewpoint, we simply cannot have perfect AI. By perfect, I mean AI that will always produce secure, privacy-friendly, and reliable code. Why? Because AI was trained, I mean, all large language models, they were trained on different types of data, right? Including vulnerable code, including publicly available code, including open source software. So all this code inevitably contains some vulnerabilities or even backdoors. So when we have this kind of data in our training data set, inevitably, sooner or later, our AI generated code will contain a vulnerability or even a backdoor. So hypothetically, we could create a perfect LLM model that would write, flawless AI code or perfect from a legal viewpoint contracts. But we don't have training data because in order to generate contracts, LLM models were trained on all kind of poorly written contracts. In order to create software, AI was trained on all kind of primitively, insecurely written code. So we cannot really take it out. And I believe that AI is great. AI is here to stay. AI is awesome. And I personally use AI for many different types of tasks, but it's not here to replace any of us for the time being, at least.
I don't disagree with you. I tell my people here, AI is not going to take your job. Someone who uses AI better than you is going to take your job. And I think it's particularly true, even in law, quite frankly, right? I mean, yes, law is based on, precedents and stare decisis and so forth. But um, a good lawyer using AI will be a better lawyer. AI trying to be a lawyer is not a very good lawyer. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
and I think the same thing is true for coding. I think the same thing is true for marketing. I think the same thing is true for, pick a use case with AI. I think having that human expertise and leveraging AI with it is at least for the, as you say, foreseeable future, I think is where we're going. Um, However, it is turning up a lot of vulnerabilities, but it's a funny thing about these vulnerabilities that it's finding. I don't want to say they're not real because who's to say what a real vulnerability is, right? But it doesn't distinguish between something that's exploitable, reachable, truly, when we look at the criticality, whether you want to use CVE or something else, I think it has a harder time distinguishing that, and that's still sort of the human purview there. But I don't want to poo-poo it either. That's a very famous word there, poo-poo. But I don't want to poo-poo it in that it's trivial. It's certainly not trivial, right? It is going to be a big part of it. I guess my question to you then, Ilya, is as the CEO, what's ImmuniWeb's view on AI? Is it a tool you're using to help your customers? Is it something you're still looking at this point? How do you see it as the CEO of a company? How do you see it playing out for you?
So basically, our strategy has been consistent since 2019. So we've been always transparently telling our customers that, listen, we use machine learning and artificial intelligence for intelligent automation and acceleration of different tasks and processes. For example, web application, fuzzing, crawling, vulnerability verification, many other things. But AI is no magic, and when we talk about penetration testing, we always say, listen, practically and also from a legal viewpoint, you cannot have fully automated or AI powered, AI enabled penetration testing. You still need a human expert behind the wheel. And we've been always transparently saying, listen, yes, with our AI technology, you'll probably have better results compared to fully automated software in terms of quality and quantity of findings. But it's certainly not a replacement of a qualified human penetration tester. And if you need penetration testing, you still need human brain here.
Yeah, agreed. Look, I also think that at least for the short-term future, we're gonna be very much in a sort of uncharted waters kind of way where, and as a lawyer, the law is usually not a leading indicator. We're more of a trailing indicator. It's gonna take time for the legal system to catch up with what is going on in the marketplace here, right? I mean, cases will have to work their way through the system. They'll have to be reasoned out and stuff like that. Um, and so in this in between time, if you will, we will see more uncertainty. We probably will see more lawsuits, incidents as as we kind of map out, if you will, where we're going. And so it's going to be interesting times. Ilya, we're almost out of time though, but for people who want to get more information on ImmuniWeb, where can they go?
So they can just go to immuniweb.com, and we have all
That's
the information transparently available there.
all righty. Hey, come back on. We always talk about AI and how this is affecting us all. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe we could get you in with one of the panels we're doing on this because they're fascinating conversations.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
All right. Dr. Ilia Kolochenko, CEO, ImmuniWeb, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this series about AI in the mainframe environment. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice with the Futurum Group. Now, this is part of a three-part series, this is segment number 2, where we're going to be discussing infusing intelligence, using AI as a partner in mainframe environment with mainframe teams. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Estaro. Anthony is Senior Director of Architecture for AI at BMC Software. Great to be talking with you, Anthony.
Thanks, Pitch. Thanks for having me.
When organizations feel they're ready to kind of take that next step, how does generative AI start to make an impact in the mainframe environment?
Yeah, so we start looking at AI as a partner. Yeah, I was a developer for 30 plus years. Boy, I would have loved to have AI at some point in my career. Why? Because from a developer's perspective, generative AI would have taken a lot of the toil out of my day-to-day activities. I could have used AI in a way where just the grunt work I had to do day in and day out during my developer journey, AI could have been a tremendous help in that regard. Take the friction out of my day. When it comes to the AI ops space as an example. I spent a lot of years building data visualization solutions, dashboards, etc. AI as a partner in that journey is how many times are we looking at operational dashboards and we're seeing blinking lights, or maybe we're not seeing certain things that may be in graphs or a data grid that's being shown. And, we're looking at it. It would be nice if we had AI sitting there as your partner, observing the same thing you are, and then pointing things out to you that you would otherwise miss. So I really liked that portion of generative AI making an impact day in and day out. This is kind of tied to what we talked about previously. If I'm a next generation mainframer and I'm new to the mainframe space, having AI as a partner in my daily journey, whether that's infusion in products that I'm using, or that's knowledge-based access, as we discussed, all of that constitutes that generative AI bubble to help me start my journey on that mainframe space. So that's really where I see it helping folks on the mainframe accelerate their day by taking things off their plate that they shouldn't be worried about and focus on the more important high-value items and innovation that they should be doing day in and day out.
Going from AI as being ready as an advisor now into AI as a partner, it seems like we're using AI more working alongside us as we're performing work, and it's providing information and giving us insights maybe, as you mentioned, that we didn't have. I'm curious if you have some kind of real world examples where generative AI is helping us.
We do. I mentioned I talk to a lot of customers, and one of the things that comes up all the time is COBOL code explain. They're looking at, they got that next generation, looking at code bases that are 25, 30 year plus, and there's a lot of complexity. There's code comments in there that are out of date. There are module comments that are in there that are out of date. Real world example, we've delivered through BMC AI Assistant that capability to do that code explain, to do that document generation. Customers are using that. They're giving us really good feedback on their usage with that. That's a high value return. Another area that we focused on was our AI ops space, where BMC AI Assistant was able to go in there and when there was a problem in the environment, what's the root cause of this problem? We have a lot of very sophisticated machine learning models and information that's presented to the user in that product experience. When generative AI came onto the scene, it was a great opportunity for us. We were able now to take something that was very complex to explain and describe in a user experience and have BMC AI Assistant come in and then just explain what the problem is, what the root cause was in plain terms. Not only that, BMC AI Assistant that was also able to give next step recommendations on how to resolve or prevent that problem from happening again. So these are real world problems that we've gotten feedback on how the AI truly helped elevate the business value that we're delivering out of our solutions.
Now, you've talked about AI as a partner, giving us insights, helping us along, maybe triaging or diagnosing what issues might be. There's so much knowledge that's gained in that process, but we're losing that knowledge with a lot of our workforce as they retire, move on, et cetera. Talk about that knowledge loss and how AI can help us with that.
Yeah, so the knowledge loss is real, as we all know. And, an AI system is only as good as its knowledge. And what I mean by that is not the LLM knowledge. It's your institutional knowledge. It's the knowledge that your staff carries day in and day out. How do we capture that? How do we infuse that into an AI system such that the AI system has more context and relevance and becomes smarter for the users using that? That is critical. So how do we capture that institutional knowledge? We augment, or we have a facility within BMC AI Assistant to capture that information and infuse it. Once it's infused, that's where the real power is. And it's not just a chat conversation where you're going to go to BMC AI Assistant and you're going to ask questions and you get responses back based on that captured knowledge, right? We talked about that in the previous video. That was around the advisor model. But imagine capturing knowledge and infusing in a product experience. Maybe it's in the AI ops space, capturing that knowledge so that when events happen and things happen within a dashboard or a report gets generated and there's alerts and exceptions and alarms that were generated, instead of just giving these generic type of insights out of the product, we can customize those responses and put them in terms that are relevant for that organization. And the way we could do that is by capturing that tribal knowledge. I have to repeat that. I can't say tribal knowledge. Is capturing that enterprise knowledge that your senior staff has, and based on processes and workflows they have when certain situations arise, we can infuse that in so the AI can respond in a way that is relevant to your organization, for your organization to take the right steps that's relevant for you. That's what capturing institutional knowledge within an AI experience to give you back responses in that regard.
So as we move along the journey that you've talked about, adapting and using AI, might look like.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So at this point, we've been talking about language models from the AI perspective and augmenting that with institutional knowledge or real-time data as an example. But generative AI itself is not enough, right? And when you're looking at infusing AI in your solutions and delivering that value to our customers, and a lot of times it's a collection of different AI techniques that we need to pull together to formulate the answer or the response that we want to give. And it's this combining of different AI techniques together to formulate that response. That's what we call hybrid AI. So as an example, I mentioned the BMC AIMI Ops Insight product. There's a lot of sophisticated machine learning models driving that product, that experience. But we augmented that with generative AI for the explainability and the next step recommendations. So it's the combination use of machine learning models with generative AI language models, working them together. That's a great example of a hybrid AI solution. So you can combine things like, classic rules-based AI with language models, or rules-based AI with machine learning models, whatever the application may be. It's this combination together. That's the way we talk about it, is in the terms of hybrid AI. And that's a key element on our next video on how our AI agents think along their journey.
Very good. That'll be a nice incentive to watch that third part, I'm sure.
Yes.
Well, before we get there, any final advice you have for organizations as they're beginning to integrate generative AI?
So when it comes to generative AI, again, you got to be really practical on your use cases that you want to apply with generative AI. Start with the explainability. No matter what your area is or your domain is that you want to apply AI, start with generative AI with explainability. Once you get that sorted out, move on to that next step. That next step is when you explain a situation, what's happening here, how do we do the next step? What's my next step actions? Whether that's to resolve a problem, or the next step action could be simply as notifying someone that a certain situation is going on. But take that type of journey with your AI. Do the explain part, and then move to recommendations, the next step with generative AI. And how you're going to do that is, especially with the recommend part, that's where you capture that institutional knowledge that you have with your senior staff that you infused into your AI system. It could provide all those insights to the AI system on guiding it towards that output on those next steps.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. It's great for you to share your experiences of your journey that you can help others along the way in that process. So you've joined us for our second segment in this three-part series, talking about infusing intelligence, AI as a partner, generative AI in the mainframe environment. We're sure happy that you've joined us, and we hope that you'll stick around and check out the third segment. We kind of give you a little hint there of some of the things that we're going to be talking about. It's about acting with confidence when we have AI as an agent of change that's making things happen for us and with us in this environment. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the next segment.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Techstrong AI Leadership Insight Series. I'm your host, Mike Vizard, today with Ben Schreiner, who's head of AI and modern data strategy business development for AWS. And well, we're having a little chat about how small businesses are using AI. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I think we've all been heavily focused on larger enterprises because, well, they have enough money to go and experiment with different things. But I think smaller businesses tend to be a little more careful about what they invest in and what they're going to be willing to spend some time with. Yet I know that they're playing around with AI, but from what you're seeing, is there a different set of behaviors and patterns to how they approach AI?
I think your characterization is fair. They're definitely more cautious with their money and time. I've yet to meet a small business owner who had enough time to do everything that they're trying to do. But what we are seeing is them experiment early days with AI in an effort to save time. AI has an amazing ability to help folks compress time in a lot of different areas. And I'll say this about small and medium businesses: most will leverage some of the free consumer-based tools as their entry point on their phone, and helping them think through things. But the other place that small and medium businesses are going to see AI is in the software that they use. And so here at AWS, we're helping a number of software providers embed AI into their software that then gets consumed by a small business. For example, QuickBooks or TurboTax. We've been working with Intuit and the teams over there to enhance their software and embed AI.
Do you think that is maybe the primary vector through which most people get exposed to AI? It starts showing up as some sort of AI agent embedded in a SaaS application that happens to be running on a cloud platform somewhere. But ultimately, this is the easiest path of least resistance, shall we say?
Yeah, I think again, most people will get exposed as AI as a feature of the software that they already use. Ideally, making that software easier to use, easier to interact with, all of the promises of using natural language to maybe get new and different analysis or reports out of their accounting system, for example, or inventory management. But where I see small businesses starting to get curious is truly on operational efficiency, right? And where or how they can better market or create, let's call it production level or agency level advertisements and imagery that maybe they couldn't afford in the past, but now with some of these AI tools, they're able to develop some of that content themselves without having to hire an outside agency, and allowing them to do more themselves than maybe they did in the past.
To your point about that, do small businesses have an advantage in terms of, well, there are just fewer silos in their organizations. And if I go into a large enterprise, sometimes getting multiple disciplines and groups to collaborate is challenging. Whereas in a small business, well, necessity is often the mother of invention, right?
It is. I will say in all of my conversations with small and medium business owners and executives, if there is a compelling problem and there is a proven solution, they can move very quickly. And that is their competitive advantage in the marketplace. I would argue they're also able to adapt to changing customer, needs and expectations a little faster. Again, because they don't have, maybe some of the bureaucracy or bulk that a larger organization would have. So that nimbleness is definitely something that many small and medium businesses wield in order to gain market share and protect their competitive advantage. And I think AI presents an opportunity for them to do that again, and leverage the tools in new and different ways, and experiment. But right now, it's really about learning what these tools can do, and how they can help. And I give most executives this advice: is to focus on real problems. Right? Don't just play with the new toy. Focus on a real problem, like where do you spend too much time, or where are you losing money? How do you get ahead of it? How do you become more predictive? How do you have better visibility into your entire operation, so you can focus on applying the technology in places where it can have the biggest impact as solving real problems. That's where you're going to get return on time and return on the invested money that's associated with it. And that's the biggest benefit for any leadership team or operator is using these tools in places where it makes a difference.
Do you also think that maybe they'll have a little more confidence in their ability to compete with larger companies because they'll be like, well, AI is leveling this playing field a little bit?
You know what? I do think our efforts to democratize access to this, transformational technology is going to help. Historically, technology would be rolled out to only those who could afford it, right? The great big organizations would get it first and have, many years worth of competitive advantage before it trickled down to the small and medium business owners. This technology is very different. And again, AWS's efforts to not only democratize access to the cloud, but also to these transformational technologies like AI, as well as making multiple models available. That's an area, again, of differentiation for us. We don't know, what model will work best for this use case or for that customer. And so we make it available, a marketplace where you can try different models to see what works best, evaluate them, and make the best decision for your organization versus being an organization that provides, we certainly have our own models, but we want to make sure that our customers have a breadth of choice so they can make the right decisions for their business.
Mhm. Will it get easier to orchestrate some of these AI agents? I think a lot of times folks get involved with various AI agents, especially in different SaaS apps, and they go, gee, I wish that AI agent would just talk to that other AI agent and we could automate this even further.
I will say this again, if we're forward looking, will it get easier? Yes. At the same time, some things will get more complex, right? And so you can imagine a world where, the example you just gave, I think a lot of people in their head want a personal assistant that helps them do the things that they need to get done in a given day, both professionally and potentially personally. But there'll be a time where agents are interacting with each other, and then you have this concept of complexity because you could have hundreds or thousands or potentially millions of agents, and you need to be able to monitor and govern and ensure that things are being done in a secure way. And so, it's going to solve some problems. It is definitely going to create new problems. That's the beauty of technology and the evolution of it, is we uncover new bottlenecks. But ultimately, if we're forward looking, we anticipate a need to monitor and govern, a need to authenticate agents. Like Mike, your agent should have access to the data that you're allowed to have access to. My agent shouldn't be able to access that same data, right? If I'm not entitled to it. Like for example, the compensation for all the executives, right? There's only certain people that should have access to that, and the agents are a proxy for someone. They're doing something on someone's behalf, and we need to make sure that that authentication and that security is maintained so that you're not accidentally leaking out, potentially, valuable information or, personally identifiable information or credit card information. Like you wouldn't want these agents to be compromised and allowing, somebody to be taking data out of your organization. So, is this just it's a new paradigm, but some of our, tried and true best practices when it comes to security need to be applied in this new, brave new world, if you will.
Mhm. They say good fences make for good neighbors. So how do I put those boundaries in for AI agents, and how do they get set up?
Yeah, I've been advising folks who there was a rush to do AI, and there are a lot of folks that put a chatbot out as quickly as they could, and maybe skipped a few of the best practices on making sure security was set up appropriately. So I have a test that I ask folks to run if they have a corporate chatbot that they've deployed, is to ask it for a chocolate chip cookie recipe. Because unless you're in the chocolate chip cookie making business, it shouldn't give you an answer. And I believe that we, the humans and the executives listening to this, it's our responsibility to put AI in a box and tell it what it can and can't do on our behalf, right? And if we don't do that, then we've invited risk to our organization that we probably don't want. And I used a cookie recipe as a pretty innocent question that you could ask. You could think of a lot more nefarious questions that you could ask AI to give you answers to. And if it does, and then somebody goes and does something, bad, and it gets traced back to your corporation, that's not what anybody wants. And so we have a responsibility to put appropriate guardrails around AI. We also, as leaders, have a responsibility to our people, to bring them along for this journey, to expose them and create an environment where they can learn how to use these tools to augment their productivity and their capabilities. So ultimately, you can serve more customers faster, better, and more efficiently. But ultimately, as a society, this is amazing transformational technology that I encourage everyone to learn as much as possible about it. Figure out, even if you start out figuring out how it can help you personally, and then start to think about how you might be able to apply it inside your business. But these are tools that we need to learn how to leverage, and the tools are only getting better. That's also the exciting part of what's going on here. And you've been in technology for a while, as have I, and I've never seen anything move as fast as what we're seeing, over the last couple of years when it comes to AI evolution as well as investment.
I sometimes feel like when I talk to people and there are issues that they run into, usually can be traced back to, well, the AI agent was perhaps a little overly aggressive in its desire to be helpful.
Yes.
And then it did something like deleting emails or whatever.
Right.
Do we need to kind of revisit how these AI agents are kind of programmed, because they are aggressively trying to help, but in some ways that can be, the cure winds up being worse than the disease, right?
Yeah, unintended consequences, we call it, right? Like, and I do think right now, even if we just look at prompting, asking questions of an AI application, we are learning to ask better questions, right? Because if you ask not a great question, you get not a great answer. And then you start to refine the questions and you get better and better answers. So we're providing more context to the agents so that they're able to do a better job, and understand what the intent is, have all the information they need to be successful. And that ensures a higher probability of success. The generic agents that sort of you're describing that maybe haven't been given, the right guardrails or parameters with which to operate, we are learning as we interact with these things and things go wrong, where we need to put better controls in place in order to protect the data, or to make sure that something isn't it's not doing something we don't want it to do. For example, some of the agents that I've been working with, it'll come up with a plan, and then it says, here's the plan. Do you want me to do it? Right. So it checks in with me before it goes and does it. And that's a great check until the human gets a little lazy, right? And says yes. And then you find out something happened that you didn't want, and you go back in going, what happened? And sure enough, it says it was going to do it. And you just were quick to say yes because you just wanted to move on and probably didn't use your critical thinking or didn't read or pay attention to all the details. And so I think having a human in the loop and making sure that it's checking in with you, but that still puts the responsibility on us to make sure, again, that these agents are doing what it is we want them to do. And I'd say, Mike, the important thing is when you start to have autonomous agents, you want a way to monitor, because there's this concept of drift where you told it to do one thing and then slowly over time it starts to drift off and do something else or not exactly what you had said. And you want a way to be able to notice when that's happening, right? And so maybe you set a pretty narrow, think of a road, and you have the lane, and you want to set the lane for AI, but you want to know when it gets close to the edge so that you can perhaps take corrective action to make sure it stays in the lane that you intend it to be in. And I think that's part of us learning how to deploy these things in ways where we can trust that it's doing what we want it to do and only what we want it to do. And every time we have an example of something getting deleted or accidentally, happening, it's an opportunity for us to learn, how do we put those guardrails in place to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But it's a learning process, and I would submit to you, doesn't matter how big the organization is, how much money they have, we're all still learning how to use these tools and techniques. That's some of the fun. And that's what I would encourage, again, all of your listeners to again, begin the learning, learn as fast as you can. What they're able to do is mind-boggling. Like what we could do today, like fundamentally wasn't feasible 2 years ago. And I'd argue what we're going to be able to do in 2 years hasn't even been invented yet. And that's a pretty awe-inspiring statement to make. But I think your audience, the small and medium business owner, has so much to gain if they figure out how to use these tools to their advantage.
As I was listening to you, I couldn't help be reminded that, well, those interactions go on between humans all the time, right? We tell people we think we want them to do something, and then, it winds up having those unintended consequences. So
Sure does.
maybe the AI agents aren't that different, or is it just that the AI agents can't really undo something after they've done it the way maybe humans can?
You know what? Again, I think this is an evolving area. One of the things I've been saying to folks is that we are the last generation of managers to only manage people. And so if you think about it for a second, I believe in the not too distant future, you'll have agents that are working on your behalf that you need to monitor like you would a human and make sure that they're still doing what it is you want them to do. And you'll need to coach them and correct them as needed so that they stay, in that lane. Very similar, to how you would train a junior employee. There's a ramp time. There's mistakes that are made. And ideally, both the human and AI can learn from those mistakes and evolve and get better and become more valuable to you, and your organization.
Ultimately, these AI agents will encounter AI agents that work for other businesses, and there'll be some level of negotiation that goes back and forth. And how do you envision that might happen? Because a small business might be trying to sell something at the highest margin, and the buyer of that service or product may be trying to buy it at the lowest margin. And won't those two agents just kind of try to beat each other up until they call for help?
And that may be it, right? That call for help becomes important. We're already seeing agents be used to review contracts and terms of contracts, to analyze, service level agreements. Again, as you grow in size, you have more and more of these binding relationships, and certainly the scenario you just gave, where you have one agent representing one organization and another agent, maybe a buyer representing, their organization. And as long as you've provided the parameters that say, you can sell, I want you to optimize, margin, and here is the the lane with which you can operate. And provided, those two things match up, and maybe it's a Venn diagram and there's a little bit of overlap and they strike that balance. But ultimately, if not, right, in the scenario you gave where one agent's just trying to drive the price below where the other agent's willing to sell, then you have an impasse, and potentially that gets escalated to say, hey, humans, like, we weren't able to come to a mutually, within our bounds, a mutually agreeable, contract. Do we want to ignore and move on, or do you want to have an exception to the parameters that you've given me to operate? And honestly, Mike, it's no different than what we do with humans, right? You have a seller out there and they're given a margin target, or don't go below this price. But we're here to make money, and want to obviously try and optimize our margins. I'm in the process of buying a car right now, and they've gone to their manager to see if they can accept my offer. So it's the same parallel, just in a potentially in a much broader expansive context. And I would say this for the small medium businesses. Historically, we have thrown human capital as the way to expand, right? And what I want you to have this mental model is AI should be augmenting your humans so that they can do more, talk to more customers, serve more customers, but it becomes a scaling mechanism so that you don't just have to hire more and more people in order to scale your business. I'm not saying you're not going to have to hire people. That's not it at all. But it is, each human can now do, maybe it's, 30, 40% more. And that allows you to scale your business and continue to invest both in your people and in your business's growth. That's one aspect. The other aspect I think AI brings to the table is tapping into human creativity. Most small and medium businesses started because they saw an opportunity that wasn't being met by the big corporations, or they spun out of a big corporation to go do their own thing. And I think AI is going to empower a whole bunch of new entrepreneurs to be able to take that risk and go and create value for their customers, being able to create their own website, their own shop, and help customers in new and different ways. Ultimately, creating new products and services for all of us to enjoy.
All right, folks, you heard it here. The next few years, it may not be about the technology at all, as much as just us humans and AI agents trying to figure out how to live with each other. Hey, Ben, thanks for being on the show.
It was great to meet you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you all for watching. Try that again. And thank you all for watching the latest episode of the Techstrong.ai Leadership Insight series. You can find this episode and others on our website. We invite you to check them all out. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Futurum Group. Each episode explores a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies that drive it. You can find us on securityboulevard.com, the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, Techstrong TV, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. I want you to meet today's guests before we jump into the episode, starting with Fernando. Fernando, it's good to see you.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the topic. We'll get to that in a second. I do apologize beforehand. I am going through a nasty cold, so I'm energy not at 100%. I'll do the best I can.
It's totally okay, Fernando. We, you know how it is when it starts to get close to spring, our body is like, what is this weather change?
Yes,
Mhm.
and then we're coming up with the time zone change, or not time zone, sorry, daylight savings coming up next week.
Oh yeah, by the time this episode comes out, we will be close if we haven't already done it, depending on which part of the world you're in. Timeanddate.com is your
Yes,
friend.
absolutely.
And joining us also is Mitch Ashley. Mitch, as always, good to see you as well.
Great to see you. Great to be here with all of you. Fernando, if I can give you some good news, you're getting over the cold before RSAC instead of after. So Look on the bright side.
Let's hope. Yes, because yes,
So
for so many reasons.
always. Great to be here. Great to be talking cyber with you guys. Enjoy it.
Awesome. And of course, I'm Tom Hollingsworth, all things related to security at Tech Field Day, which is a part of the Futurum Group. But let's jump into today's episode. Now, when you listen to your favorite episode of Security Boulevard, and let's face it, I hope they're all your favorite episodes. One of the things we talk about when we get to the end is we always talk about some of the research that our guests are doing as part of the Futurum Group. Well, today we wanted to talk about some of the research that we're doing here at the Futurum Group, and specifically, I wanted to let Mitch Ashley talk about this because this is research that he has come up with that published about a week ago on February the 24th. So, Mitch, tell us what you have learned.
Well, I wear this hat of having a lot of practitioner experience in my background. About 2/3 of the time I've been like a CTO leading development teams in security products as well as SaaS and other things. So I can't help get away from some of that CTO DNA, kind of the architecture of things. And I thought, I think what I struggle with in the industry with so much happening all at once is how do you put all the pieces together and say, what's happening? And is this that, or is this something else? And so what needs to happen? And then also you combine, Fernando and I are always talking about the things to do that will make it easier for us to know that things are secured. And so as I was doing our research, one of them we do a buyer study. And that buyer study is people who are spending some money on software security. Fernando does one on security, and a lot of different topics in that. In my particular study, it asks about AI observability, a lot of observability questions, but AI observability and agent observability, AI ops, things like that. And in a 1-year period since I did the second to last update to this, there was one AI automation in the top 10 of what were the drivers for looking at observability platforms. In this round, a little more than 12 months later, 4 are in the top 10, actually the top 6, frankly. AI observability, agent observability, AI ops, and also cost optimization, including AI as well. So the market has clearly recognized, just as one set of data points, that we need better observability. We need to be able to understand what is happening with AI. Now, let me back up for a minute. And then, Fernando, I'd love to get you to chime in too. So we are in this rush of recreating how we design and create software, right? The agents are part of that fabric. They are the fabric for a lot of the development. But we're also developing software with agents. So the agents themselves are being used to create the agents that are the software that we want to deploy into production. In the meantime, the enterprises are saying, wait, I need accountability for all this stuff. I need governance. I need behavior analysis. I need guardrails. I need governance. I need the ability to meet my compliance requirements. So before you deploy any of that at scale, I need you to address the security, compliance, behavior issues that we need, the visibility. I think Fernando's heard me say, trust is visibility. When you experience it, you can see it. Okay, I can trust it. If it's trust me, you might trust me, but maybe that's not always a wise thing to do. So that's why I came up with this idea of observability-native. But before we get into that, that's sort of the long windup of where we're going and why observability is even elevated even more than it's been up to this point. Fernando, what's your thoughts?
No, I thank you. It was interesting because we were just chatting after the episode before we recorded. Like I helped review the initial research and really liked it. I think that this comes with this. It's 2026. We're talking about AI all the time, right? I think that this is a very useful frame a useful time to remind ourselves that specifically when it comes to security, right? And we'll get to the observability part in a second. But specifically when it comes to security, we always talk about three ways to look at AI and security. AI for security. I'm taking AI capabilities, I'm deploying them for security use cases. AI SOC, AI in the software development lifecycle, AI in GRC, AI in data classification, and on and on and on. And like Tom and I are working together on something on SASE, AI and SASE, right? All those things. right? The other one is, okay, security for AI. And that's the challenge, right? Okay, you have your organization running agents and AI in multiple scenarios. How do you ensure trust? And to your point, Mitch, trust and visibility. Absolutely. Right. But it's more than visibility, right? Okay, how do you understand what the threat model is for that deployment of AI? Oh, look, I have an AI agent that is running on my machine that is helping me with emails. Oh, wonderful, right? And what is how do you think through what bad things can happen with email, right? And then things flow from there, right? But the notion of securing AI deployment. The third one people don't talk about as much. I think it's important. It's the security from AI, right? It's okay. You have AI, even if you do nothing, right? AI is being used by your adversaries, right? Phishing, deep fakes, and so on. What changes in your processes to handle this? But while these three major areas are important, right? I think that the meta level problem at this is that we're asking we have as security practitioners to embrace the non-technical side of us. We have to understand the business that our organizations do, right? Because the failures that we're seeing in AI, they happen not just at the technical level, they happen at the process level. They happen at and when I say process, I don't mean PS-EF. I mean the business process, right?
That too, but
Absolutely,
business
sure.
process
But
too.
this is important because we are asking security teams and development teams and observability teams to better understand the processes around our business. Some of the most enjoyable time I spent in my past years has been on anti-fraud, right? And it was fascinating to see, okay, how fraud actually happens. That requires a level of understanding of how your business operates. And I keep coming back to that as we need to have that higher level of understanding of what our businesses are doing, right? You can't just be a security engineer who looks at an event on an endpoint and okay, fine, it's running Mimikatz. Mimikatz is bad. Great. Okay, whatever. Right. You need the higher level of understanding. Oh, look, this is actually a workstation that an administrator used for that a domain admin used for something else, and maybe that domain admin credential is there now. And by the way, that domain is actually our main corporate. It's not just a test domain; it's a live one. Anyway, the point being, we need to understand what's going on, and that observability drive that you're talking about is really important.
No, I completely agree. And I think that one of the problems that we run into is that we have fallen into a world where observability is critical, but there's not as much transparency as we would like. Because one of the things that we're running into is a lot of the context around what we're seeing out there is hidden from us. Why do we do things the way that we do? Why does this policy exist? And I think that from a business, process perspective, like we do this because of regulation or we do this because of that. But even some of the things that you wouldn't expect to filter through there need to be visible to organizations that are trying to build an automated strategy that has closed loop automation on top of it. We, as of this recording, if you have been in the news, you probably heard the horror story coming out of Meta, where an AI agent decided to delete somebody's entire inbox. Even though you kept telling it to stop, it wouldn't stop. And you're thinking to yourself, well, who would delete an entire inbox? Because you have the kinds of observability to say, we don't just delete inboxes. Like, even if we know it's an inbox we need to delete, we're more likely going to archive it for a period of time to make sure that it's not actually, there's nothing in there that we need. Or, there's a lot of other things that we would do rather than just effectively removing it. Or in the case of this agent, not just deleting the inbox, but deleting every message in the inbox one at a time or in groups of 10, because, well, why not? We didn't teach the agent not to do that. We hope that it had assumed that you shouldn't do that, But that's an observability transparency problem. What if corporate policy is we don't delete inboxes, that we archive them and then we, remove them from the server at a point in time or whatever? Is that documented somewhere? Is that written down somewhere so that the system knows that that's the way we do it? And if you're just sitting there shrugging your shoulders going, well, I don't know. Well, then why not? Because if you don't have that, you can't truly say that you have full observability. If there's something happening in the system that can't be captured, that can't be documented, and that can't be audited, then you don't have observability. You have a hope and a prayer.
And
Well-
go ahead, Mitch. I have something, but
No, I was just going to say that in the world we're operating in, we say in security, I might need to know what we have. What's the inventory? What are all the things that we need to secure, right? Whether it's environments, software, networks, et cetera. So we always do an inventory first. And the challenge is with AI, especially with agents, is in security, an ephemeral environment is a challenge, right? So that thing goes away. I need to make sure I've got that information, kind of your inbox example, Tom. When it goes away, I want to make sure I've got the information that I can get back to what was happening in that environment. Now we're talking about ephemeral environments where the code is ephemeral. AI is building code today in our development processes. But those agents can also create prompts in and of themselves. They could actually write code themselves if we allowed them to do that. And of course, that's the question. The interesting word that comes out now is I need not just visibility for trust. To your point, Fernando, I need accountability for trust. I need to know that end to end, what that agent is doing or all those agents are doing, I can be accountable or they can be accountable. Someone in the organization can know what it is and know that we've applied controls at all the right places and can verify that that's happening, even if it's an ephemeral environment. Okay, I don't know if I teed up what you were going to say, Fernando.
Thank you for bringing up accountability. It's a huge problem, and we will talk about that in a bit. The thing I wanted to bring up is that we need, and thank you for bringing up the meta example. Right? I was thinking about that as well, and what happened. So I think it's important. This is the thing. I think it's important for us to understand how things work so we understand how they break. To the best of my knowledge, what happened in the Meta incident was that the instruction "do not delete my inbox" fell out of the window for the agent. Fell out of so the agent didn't know and just kept doing it, right? Which means that as we are deploying these things, we must understand how they work, right? We can't just say, oh, look, an agent is doing something. Very well. How does that agent actually work? What is the reasoning engine for that agent? How do I validate what that reasoning process is like, right? And those are I'd say unanswered questions at this point, right? Because we are we are playing with the not with fire. We're playing for a scenario here where if we define the tasks constrained enough, current LLMs under what their capabilities are will be able to do them properly, right? Fine, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can do that within the context of software development. Maybe we can do that within the context of security engineering, of SOC alert triage, right? The challenge is what happens when we ask it to do things that is broader than what was supposed to do, right? If I take in the human scenario, it's just because I'm a first-year intern at my company is amazing at writing code, doesn't mean I automatically give them, here's our software, here's our software architecture plans for the next 3 years. Please go implement it, right? We have to understand the capabilities. But your point about accountability is also, okay, who is responsible when something fails? And that is the thing that I was thinking about this in the shower today, right? because we are
Because that's just who you are.
because we are the problem with that we're facing is that there is no recourse, right? If I make a mistake at work, if any of us make a mistake at work, right, we have social capital, professional capital embedded into what we do every day, right? And there is a negative consequence for us. Like if I make a mistake and I'm let go, I don't want to do that. So I am motivated to not make that mistake. Agents have no such motivation, right? And I think that's something we. Oh, I'm sorry. I just deleted your entire code base. Oh yes, I am so sorry. So what, right? That drives me crazy.
But it's interesting that you bring that up because you talk about the intern example. And if I give an intern a task that's above them, what am I expecting? Am I expecting the intern to go out and get like 14 ebooks on whatever topic that is and spend hours or weeks of their time devouring it and then doing what I said? Or do I expect someone who I know isn't trained to ask for help? Because I would expect in a situation like that, if I am overseeing someone, if I'm training someone, that they would come back to me and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not sure about this. Can you give me some guidance? And you can say, okay, well, I've taught you this and this is how you do it. Okay, now I'm learning, right? Whereas AI generally doesn't know what to do there. And one of the points that I think is important in Mitch's outline here is feedback loop actionality, right? You have to be able to have a feedback loop, take actions based on the inputs that you give it. But what happens when the feedback loop breaks? Because there's only two options, right? It either does something, or it's three options. It does what it's supposed to do, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, like it breaks, or it does something it's not supposed to do. And that's what we're seeing, like in the example that we keep bringing up with Meta, where the bot ripped through everyone's email. What would I want it to do if it breaks? Like, if it halts, should it throw an email and go, hey, I couldn't complete the task because you didn't give me enough information or because it's outside of the bounds of what I'm supposed to do? That's what we expect the intern to do, right? Do nothing, break nothing. Versus, oh, well, hey, I know that you told me that you wanted me to do this thing, but what I actually did instead was something completely different that was unexpected. Well, why didn't you ask me first? Well, because the loop's not coded to do that. And this kind of goes back to the problem that we've been having with LLMs for the last 2 years. What happens when they encounter incomplete information? Do they tell you that they did? Or do they make something up and fill in the blank? Because their directives otherwise were just say something, make something
Tom,
up, whatever sounds good.
Let's kind of build on, I think, Fernando, the word you were looking for was context window. When things page out of the context window, right?
Yeah.
You lose it. So let me introduce this into our context window of our discussion. So, and we mentioned the word observability-native, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's a whole, we'll provide a link to the page that describes it in more detail. But just as a working definition for what do I mean by observability native, well, it's not software, it's not a product, but it's an architectural approach when you think of it a reference model, where agent behavior, and I'll break this down, is captured and structured first-class telemetry embedded throughout the entire software development process, all the way into production. Even at that point of when you're in design plan mode, using an AI agent to help you with that, all the way to operating this, enabling, most importantly, machine speed, governance, and safe autonomous operation. Okay, a lot of nice words in there, but essentially what that breaks down to is a couple of things. One is, you hear me say the words first-class telemetry. What I mean by that is it's not something we capture later. Let's see what spilled out on the operations room floor for data that we could go put some telemetry about. Unfortunately, if we have some OTel information, is that going to help us understand what these agents are doing? And did they go through any of those three paths? And which one, Tom? So you referenced something called the loop, the feedback loop. So what I started with in defining this as well, you have to think about what agents do and how would you describe that? So the kind of structure that I created is this 4 steps that it goes through. An agent looks at what's the intent? What did you tell it to do? What does it think it's supposed to do? What's the goals that it's supposed to do? Second is reasoning. What choices does it make? and resources that it used to make those choices. Does it rely on what models? Did it do some procedural logic to create that? Why did it decide that was the path to go down? The third is the constraints. What constraints were applied when it was considering the paths that it might go down? Okay, well, I would normally go talk to this model and feed it this prompt, but I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to put in a prompt that says, "How do we delete everybody's email boxes?" That's out of guard. That's one of the guardrails, or something like that. And of course, what was the outcome? What did it do? To your point, Tom, what are those actions that it did, didn't, failed, succeeded doing? So when you have those 4 steps, at least you have something you can now understand of what was it trying to do? How did it decide what it wanted to do? Did we control it? That accountability part, and then the outcomes. And if you have observability for those 4 steps, now you can start to understand what agents to do. Now that's easier said than done. In order to do that, we have to build that observability into agents as they're created, and as the agents that are creating them also need that observability, so we can provide full accountability, because building agents is just a supply chain issue. It's a software supply chain. I mean, if I infected the agents that are building our software, well, I've just captured your supply chain. Same thing. So there are 7 other principles around this. One of them is around that AI, around the first class telemetry for agent across the life cycle. But I'll pause there. But I think that describes pretty well. Tom, this is relatively new to you. Fernando got to peer review this and provide a lot of input. Interested in your feedback or your questions, thoughts on this.
I think it's important to do this in the cycle because so many people want to skip to the 4th part, the outcome, right? They don't think about all the other stuff that goes along with it. Think about the number of people who just put in like terrible prompts. And then they're like, well, why did I get terrible results? Well, what was the intent? Like you have to define that. Like, think about people who don't write a rough draft of paper and then they get a bad grade. And they're like, well, why not? Well, because it's a jumbled mess, right? And then you've got to think through the reasoning. Every school student out there that's listening to this, which I hope we have a few more now, knows show your work. Why? Because if I know where your work is, I can see where you went wrong. And we don't have to back all the way back up the decision tree. We can start right here. Those things are so critical. What do I want to have happen? What is the intent? And show me what you were thinking, right? Like you've got to have that. And constraints, like anyone who's ever taken a test, especially a practical test, knows that there are constraints. I'm a CCIE, and there are constraints all over that test. Make the output of this command look like that, but don't use this command. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm trying to force you down a specific path of reasoning when I do. And I want to see how you adapt to that. You've got to iterate through that. That's why we call it a loop, right? And I think that that's so critical because people want to leave out the first 3 steps because they require me to do stuff. They require me to think. They require me to put my effort into the model. And I just want magic to happen. Well, if you've ever played D&D, magic doesn't just happen. You have to spend all night reading the book and learning the words and preparing the ounce of gold that you have to do to cast the spell. And then tomorrow it looks like magic because you spent all this work ahead of time making it happen.
In camp, so you rest so you could cast those spells.
Exactly. Like, people just don't understand that there's a lot of prep work that goes into this to get the outcome that you want. So yeah, saying that from an observability perspective, you've got to have this iterative loop that you go through in order to make sure that you're getting proper output. Because I bet you, if you spend more time on the first 3 and less time on the 4th, what you get out of the 4th is going to be a lot closer to what you want.
And
you won't know why you got it. Sorry,
no,
go ahead,
and
Fernando.
the thing I liked about that feedback loop when first came across it, that Mitch's work, is this is independent of your role, right? If you are the prototypical year 1 intern, right? Figure out intent, figure out reasoning, figure out guardrails, and then outcomes, right? If you are a senior experienced security engineer working with AI, figure out intent, figure out reason, figure out constraints, figure out outcomes, right? So I think it's really interesting. The other thing I picked out on Mitch's work is he does a lot of work on observability, like observability for. We're speaking primarily to a security audience, right? But observability is huge in DevOps and SRE and all those areas, right? And the thing that is interesting is that how close those areas actually are, and how to security. And I've been watching this industry for years, and there's uh, so many scenarios where you have this coming together of security and observability, security and all. Like I think I'm on record saying I never liked DevSecOps as a term, because I think that the sec should be implied, right? It's like inside DevOps, right? And it's really interesting to see Mitch bring this framework together, because this is something that applies well enough to the operations teams that may focus primarily on observability, but there's a ton of security insights here, and the same thing for the security teams. Sorry, Mitch.
No, I kind of liken it to, the whole shift leftward. And we've talked a lot about, have we succeeded? Why didn't it succeed? Why did it fail? I think this is more about 3D security. It isn't shifting anywhere. It's like you need security everywhere. You need it through the process that you create the software. You need it through your security operations center. You need it in the ops. You need it in platform engineering. So why not engineer it upfront into what we're doing? And that's what I don't know any other way we can provide accountability about AI without putting those signals into the processes that we use to develop it and in the software that we develop in that process. Then we can potentially use those. And the decision loop cycle, that's a really simple idea, but it captures the essentials, which is my whole reasoning here was, don't create anything too complicated. People will go, blah, blah, whatever that meant. Okay, I can understand that. Now, there's 7 other principles that go along with this observability native. We've kind of talked a lot about many of them. I'm not going to go in through each of them or even go into them in much more detail. You can read that in the paper, in the research report. But it's a lot about this unification, this feedback idea, the signals being first class. I think things that most people would say, I agree with that. I know we don't do that in full, but that's what we should be. When I go to my observability vendor, I want to ask them whether they use this term or not. Talk to me about observability native. How is observability built natively into what you're doing? Whether it's security software, apps, productivity tools, development tools. I want to know that I can provide the accountability that my leadership and my industry, my regulators are going to require of me.
I love the conversation that you just had in your head out loud with us, because it's every conversation I've ever had at every place I've ever worked. Man, that's a really great idea. Well, then why aren't we doing it? I don't know. Like, is there a process? Is there a thing that we do? And to use the old axiom of, when's the best time to write all that down? Well, when you started. Well, when's the second best time? How about right now? Like, having a framework to work in is a great idea, because it gives you checkpoints. It helps you figure out along the way, are we still doing what we're supposed to do? And yeah, some things you feel are not useful to put into a framework or to have principles that you follow. You're wrong, because if you don't, then you don't have a reason to justify the things that you do. And any kind of thing that's repeatable, that is capable of being built upon, has those things. Like, we'll reference back to this, or we'll understand how this works, or, is this something we should do? Well, let's follow one of these things. And Fernando, to the point you brought up earlier about, I feel like not having sec on anything is kind of redundant, because security should be integrated into everything. Boy, you'd think that. And yet we're still in a world where if you don't call out the fact that this needs to be secured, people won't secure it. Like, it's something that, well, other than security professionals like us who just assume that everything should be secured no matter what, we have a hard time with that, because it's friction, right? People don't want to be doing things that slow them down or that force them to second guess stuff until something deletes their whole inbox, or someone hijacks their email and uses it to spam 1,000 people. Like every one of these mistakes was written in a bad security policy somewhere, because we let it happen, right? But going back to what Mitch has written up here, like, a lot of those things could have been stopped along the way if we'd have just followed some of these processes and applied them. And like you said, this is very focused on security because the name of the podcast is Security Boulevard. But a lot of this stuff works well everywhere.
It does. You know, just to share a little bit, because in doing something like this, I ask myself, well, am I tilting at windmills? Is this another DevSecOps of we should do this, but it never totally happens? And what inspired me to create it, part of it was working with folks like you and Fernando, just talking about security in depth about AI. Another part was also the industry's reaction to AI. Because AI is different, it's not deterministic. There's a lot of things that we don't control. This whole accountability, I'm not putting AI into production at scale without some things that we need in place. The market's responded. Splunk did its data security fabric. I'm not using the right name of it, but their data fabric for security. Dynatrace and Datadog are all rushing into the market, but they're moving upstream. They want to be part of the platform, part of GitHub's Agent HQ or Amazon Bedrock Agent Core. You hear these announcements over and over, or Google just updated their agent development kit, which is now really more of an execution framework than it is a development kit. But the announcements were all about, at least some of them were all about observability as well as development and planning and projects, et cetera, the whole life cycle. So the industry is moving this way, not because Mitch thought it was a good idea or because we all sat around and, kind of complained, waxing poetically, why doesn't it happen? Why isn't it happening? It is happening. And the purpose of the framework is just give us a way to kind of understand, where does this fit in and what are they doing and why does it matter?
Yeah, one of the things that, like, I go back to my soapbox of having a stink brother. One of the things I really appreciate what you've done is that it gives us it gives us the grounding to start asking these questions, abstracting away some of the technology details. Like, okay, we don't need to talk about OTel. We don't need to talk about syslogs. We don't need to talk. Okay, we're thinking about this broader feedback loop. We're thinking about these constraints on the environment. Let's talk about those. And then, so I think it's particularly useful in that sense. I think that you have, I go back to the fascination and the challenge that we have to deal with AI is this combination of understanding how it works so that we understand where it breaks, right? And then once we understand that, okay, how do we build our organization around it? It's funny that as we track AI developments and whatnot, I see lots of people. I had to find economics references, right, Tom? I see lots of people making references to Conway's law, right, which is that principle of organization that what you ship resembles your organization, right? And what AI is forcing us to do is rethinking what we ship. Therefore, in a way, rethinking our organization. So how do we help security teams participate in that conversation about reshaping your organization? Right? A little bit higher level stuff than usual, but I think it's absolutely important.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it there because we've talked a lot about this, but really what you should do is you should go check out what Mitch has written. Mitch, if people want to find out more about the 7 principles of observability-native, how can they do that?
The easiest way is we'll provide a link in the description, but you can also Google or Perplexity, whatever you use. Just Google Futurum and observability-native. It's not a term that's used a lot. Hopefully it will be over time, but you'll find it really quickly. Or you can go to the futurumgroup.com/Mitch-Ashley, and there's posts there, but that way you don't have to kind of work through it. And I'm happy to direct people to it if you reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. You should totally check it out because there's a lot of great information there. Fernando, I know you're busy working on some stuff as well. What can people find out more about what you're doing?
No, I think that I'll point people to our main Futurum website and whatnot. I think that as we're recording this, we just turned into March, and which means that in about 21 days, I'll be at RSAC alongside Mitch, alongside you. So my brain is pretty much fried right now with what's going on at the RSAC. So that's where my mind is right now. Plus the some of the sassy work that you and I are doing and so on. So that's always fun too.
Look forward to seeing that, guys.
Yeah. And don't forget that we do have a lot of information up on our website at techfieldday.com about what we're doing around RSAC conference this year. I just actually published the schedule for the event. You're going to want to make sure you check that out, as well as all the other things that we have going on around observability and cloud and, well, security. But we want to thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and we hope that you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with notifications turned on, or that you are subscribed in your favorite podcast application, because we don't want you to miss any of the exciting episodes that we have coming up. You can also leave us a rating and a review and a comment. All of those things help us reach a wider audience of people that might be interested in security. This podcast is brought to you by securityboulevard.com and the Futurum Group. For show notes and other episodes, make sure you check out securityboulevard.com, Techstrong TV website, or the Techstrong TV app, which is available on all of the things, including all that new stuff that Apple is releasing this week as we're recording. We hope that you follow Security Boulevard on X and Twitter and LinkedIn. Just look for Security BLVD for more content. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see everyone.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, founder, CEO here at Techstrong, and welcome to our continuing series on AI, agentic AI, the future, here with the Microsoft team and our Futurum analyst team, as well as Techstrong. In this next episode, though, we're going to be joined by Mitchell Ashley of Futurum, who leads the software development lifecycle and building segment at Futurum. And Mitchell is talking with Brian Good, whose official titles is Corporate Vice President at Agents Marketing. But Brian is really here talking about agent apps and chat. And it's obviously a very hot topic as we move to an agentic AI workflow-based basis. So let's join Mitchell and Brian here with me, and it's great to have them both.
My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'm VP and Practice Lead of the Software Lifecycle Engineering Practice at Futurum Research.
And Mitch, my name is Brian Good. I lead the business applications and agents team here at Microsoft.
Let's start here. 2025 is described as kind of an inflection point for AI adoption. What do you think are the most significant changes that you've seen in organizations as they're using AI and agents in their businesses this year?
Well, I absolutely agree. 2025 is really an inflection point, and we'll sometimes describe it as the year that the frontier firm was born. And you might have heard us talk about the frontier firm before. It's this idea of companies that are putting AI really at the heart of their business, and it's enabling them to do things like reinvent the way they engage with customers or transform their business processes inside their company. And beyond. And it's really the year these frontier firms are sort of rising up, and a time when I think we can learn a lot from these early adopters and understanding how they're deploying AI, how they're being successful, and then figure out how we can take those insights and bring them to our own businesses. That's where you can have outsized impact.
As AI transforms those functions, what do you see as the new patterns of work that's enabled by Copilot and agents as customers start leveraging the technology for productivity or innovation?
I'll tell you what, I have studied these frontier firms as they come up, and there's really three patterns that I see across these frontier firms. The first is really enabling employee productivity. So they give every employee an AI assistant like Microsoft 365 Copilot, and it helps those employees be more productive. The second pattern that I see is really these frontier firms deploying AI to automate existing business processes. So, for example, they already have a way of handling expense reports, but they can use AI to speed that up and reduce costs. And that certainly results in some benefits to the customer. The third pattern is really where a customer starts from the beginning, let's say from first principles, and they reimagine a function altogether. They'll reimagine what it means to engage with a customer who has an issue with their product, and they'll put agents at the heart of that. most companies can only take on one or two of these functional transformation projects at any given time because it's a big lift. Again, it's reimagining a function from first principles. It's not just taking existing processes and applying AI to them.
How far along do you think most organizations are in their adoption cycle for generative AI?
Well, I think we're still in early innings. There's no doubt about that. Customers are starting to deploy AI in different functions, as we talked about, but certainly they haven't, in most cases, fully realized kind of the transformation that AI can have across their organization. So it's still very early innings. But I'd say we see very promising signs and green shoots of that adoption and success. Again, the key really here is to start function by function. Think about a particular function. Think about peeling it back to the business processes you need to go focus on. That's where you can have outsized impact.
How do you define agentic business applications and why are they critical for organizations?
Yeah. Well, I do have a vision that there's the application of old is really transformed with AI. And we call that new type of application the agentic business application. And the agentic biz app includes the assistant for the human to start to use. It includes pre-built business process agents that basically take the drudgery out of work. And then it's built on a data foundation. And so instead of being limited just to the data that, maybe is in the CRM system or the ERP system, it joins that with data from other lines of business systems and even productivity data so that you have a rich set of data that you can build agents on top of, and you can empower your humans to get better decisions from. And so this idea that brings all those together, the assistant, the agent, the application, I call the agentic biz app. And I think it's a really big idea.
Let's talk about why you're optimistic about the future of agentic business applications.
I have a lot of optimism here because number one, I see customers already deploying these applications and really transforming their business. So I already see people starting to get great benefit from it. But at a more human level, the thing that gets me excited is like if you think about every one of our jobs, like there's a lot of stuff that we end up having to do that really isn't adding joy to our lives. Me doing an expense report or, filling out a CRM system, with an update from a customer call. Those aren't the things that make us unique. Those aren't the things that bring joy. Those aren't really even things that add business value collectively. But if we can delegate those things to AI and agents, I think we'll enable ourselves to actually go do far bigger things and really take our ambition to the next level. And so I am absolutely excited for what the future holds.
I'd love to hear about how you see the role of AI agents evolving just over the next few years, especially as organizations start to redesign core business processes, drive outcomes for efficiency. How do you see this taking shape?
Yeah, great question. I would say that we really believe there's a spectrum of agents. There will be very simple agents that someone will use that might just be grounded on a particular knowledge source and help you, understand, what might happen from that knowledge source. Then there'll be task-based agents, and then there'll also be more sophisticated, fully autonomous agents as well. And this more autonomous agents is where you can unlock a lot of business value. These are agents that aren't called by a human. They're just running independently. They're triggered based on different actions. And they can really automate business processes, in some cases from start to finish. So we believe there's this spectrum of agents. And today, I'd say most agentic use cases start with those more simple kind of knowledge agents. But increasingly, we're seeing customers bring in these task-based agents and autonomous agents to automate things end to end.
How about the C-suite leaders? How should they be thinking about investing in agentic technologies for long-term value?
Well, every C-suite leader I talk to today is already in on AI. Like every one of them recognizes that it's a competitive advantage if they can move quickly. And if they don't move quickly, they recognize it could be a disruptive force in their industry. But let's face it, AI, it's transforming businesses, it's transforming functions, it's going to reshape entire industries. And every C-suite leader I talk to recognizes that and wants on board. What they're looking for, though, is a partner. They're looking for the tech, of course. They want to make sure they've got the right tech, but they're also looking for a partner to help them shape this in their business. And that's where Microsoft, I think, comes into play. We're not a large scale model maker, but we do take the best of the models and bring them into the workplace so that companies can use them.
We're talking about AI being a disruptive technology, probably because it seems that it really can and will affect every part of our work, our lives, et cetera. Certainly is affecting how we create software with new concepts like agents and agentic AI. Curious about your thoughts. Share with us, how does Microsoft view what the transformation is going to be like with AI really having an impact and a big benefit to businesses?
Yeah, many industry pundits will say that this move to AI agents is going to lead to the rise of more consumption like models or outcome based pricing. And I think they're right. That's definitely a direction that I see the world shifting as well. The only thing I would balance that with is that many customers are still most comfortable buying things on a per user or per seat basis. And so the approach I'm taking is, how do I enable customers to buy offerings that they're comfortable with? And that's typically like a per user or some type of per tenant type of license, while giving them the flexibility to grow and shift into more consumption models as their business changes. And so we are at an inflection point, just as we said. And I think one of the things that will change is the business model over time.
Talk some more about agentic. When you think about agents operating on their own or more autonomously, and why is that an important thing that organizations are looking to move to?
Yeah, it really comes down to business priorities. Like every business leader I talk to wants to find ways to grow their top line revenue, or they're looking for ways to automate things that they're doing so that they can save money or redirect folks to focus on more important activities. And, autonomous agents really fit that bill. Imagine in the sales context, you can have an autonomous agent, going through marketing leads and qualifying them before handing them off to a human seller. That's work that wouldn't have gotten done in the past or would have been done by a human seller and have been relatively low value, not something they really enjoyed about their job. And so an AI agent can do that and add great value to the company and, again, help that company grow on the top line.
Talk about Microsoft and the offering that you have in the context of an end-to-end toolkit, if you will,
Yeah.
for functional transformation.
As far as the toolkit goes, we really believe that there's three essential parts to it. The first is we think every employee should have an AI assistant. In our case, that's Microsoft 365 Copilot. Think of that as a productivity tool to help every employee get through their workday and get more done. It can be quite transformative. That next step up is where agents come into the picture. And I describe agents as really being for every business process or workflow in an organization. And we have a toolkit that enables customers to build their own agents. It starts with Copilot Studio, but even extends into our Azure capabilities with our Azure AI Foundry product. So agents pair very nicely with that Copilot that I described first. And then the final step is where the system of record becomes the system of action. And we'll sometimes call this the agentic business application, where you take a CRM system and you add agents and an assistant to it to really transform. Those three are the essential ingredients or building blocks for AI transformation in a frontier firm or any business at this point.
That's a great term. Can you share some examples of how Microsoft customers are already seeing measurable impact from adopting agentic business applications?
Yeah. One example I think I can give is Lifetime. They're a great customer of ours based here in the United States. They've used us as part of their finance and supply chain operations, and they've deployed agents to basically speed up how they handle and process e-commerce orders. In fact, I think it saved them 95% in terms of their e-commerce order efficiency by deploying AI agents and agentic business applications to solve that problem. So I think that's a great example. We also have another great example from Europe, a large utility named Eneco, who deployed a multi-language AI agent for their customers to help them scale and address customer questions. It's a pretty cool solution, saves them time, and again, helps them scale up. Now, it's a really exciting time in the world of agents.
You talked about the C-suite and kind of the three phases in this adoption curve as we adopt AI. What kind of recommendations do you have of like how to get started? Well, maybe near some of the near-term activities.
Well, as I said earlier, I think AI is going to transform every company, every function, every industry, and that opportunity is so vast. Sometimes it's hard to know where to get started. And I've got two bits of advice really there to anybody that is pondering that question. The first thing is, again, start with a function. Pick a function that you want to go after and then peel it like an onion. Go look at the next layer, which are the business processes in that function that you can apply a co-pilot or agents to really transform. The other thing, though, is like, don't get into analysis paralysis. Just pick a business process. Just go pick a business process to get started with. And as you learn from applying AI to that business process, whatever it is, whatever your thorniest business process is, go apply AI to it. You are going to learn. Your organization's going to learn. Your culture will adapt. And then it will flow from there. So the opportunity is so vast. Don't let that keep you from getting started. You got to get started, start simple, pick one thing, and go from there.
So as we move to an agentic business environment, let's talk about the people. How do you see the role of human creativity, judgment, leadership? How is that going to evolve?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. And one of the things that we'll often talk about is how AI and frontier firms is going to transform the way we work. It's going to change the org chart into more of a work chart. We sometimes talk about frontier firms taking on the Hollywood model, where individuals will swarm around a problem, like focus on a problem, and then disband. Once they've got a solution. And so it's absolutely going to change the way we work with others inside the workplace. It also, I think, is going to give rise to a new idea that we call an agent boss. And you can imagine, just as a people manager today might take work and delegate it to different humans on their team, resolve conflicts and sort of manage performance. Every one of us in the future is going to do that, but not just with humans, but also with agents. So imagine taking a business problem, breaking it up into pieces, delegating it to agents or agents on your team, resolving conflicts that might come up, applying human judgment. It's going to be an absolutely transformational moment. And I'm really excited about it. I really believe that, there is still a huge opportunity for humans with human ambition to go do great work amplified by AI.
Talk a little bit about how you see the difference in the working together between applications, assistants, agents, the different technologies.
Well, that's an excellent question. And we really have this complete toolkit that spans everything from the assistant to the agent to the application. And I think those three things work together in a symbiotic way. As an example, you can imagine that I might go to my assistant and, ask a simple question, my AI assistant like Microsoft 365 Copilot, and ask a question about, summarize the emails or help me respond to the emails I've got. Or I might use an agent to update a CRM record after I meet with a customer. But I'm still going to want to go to an application really that's a purpose-built experience for me if I want a more specialized or fine-tuned experience. So those three things really work together.
Talk a little bit about the industries or maybe the business functions that you expect to see reshaped first by agentic AI transformation.
Yeah, there are three or four, I'd say, functions in particular that are, I'd say, ground zero for functional transformation with AI and agents. Certainly, customer service and customer experience is one that is absolutely being reshaped, and say a very early adopter of AI, no doubt about it. Another where I'm seeing a lot of early AI adoption is in sales. And it's just because, just as we talked about, there's a big opportunity to use AI to basically increase capacity for that organization to grow top line revenue. So the business impact there is undeniable. But I also see it in places like finance and supply chain, where you can use AI to shorten the time it takes from an order to actually being able to ship it that order. We're seeing people use AI to improve accounts payable and accounts receivable. So we're seeing some pretty interesting impacts there.
Let's talk a little bit more about the frontier firms. They're not just adopting technology, they're also changing the way they're doing business around AI agents and co-pilot capabilities. Can you talk about what they're doing to invest and support the short-term ROI that they're looking to get for long-term innovation?
The most successful frontier firms are doing actually is taking a functional approach. And so certainly they'll think about their entire company, but they'll really take an approach that's function by function. They'll think about their sales function as an example, and then they'll peel back the onion a little bit and understand which processes inside their sales department they can automate using AI agents as an example. They'll look at which things their salespeople need help with, where you could pair up an assistant like Copilot to help them throughout their workday. And they'll even look at how they can bring agents in to really augment business capacity, maybe to grow top line revenue or take out costs. But starting function by function has really been the recipe that these frontier firms are using to see success. As an example, in our sales organization, by deploying Copilot and agents, we've been able to improve revenue per seller, in some cases by almost 10% in some organizations. And if you think about that, giving a seller 10% more capacity is like giving them an additional month in a year without actually having them spend any extra hours through the work week. And so there's some pretty remarkable results. That's just sales. We've been able to do the same in customer service, in our finance department, in our IT department. Our legal team has been able to reduce costs by 5% by deploying AI and agents within their functions.
How do we ensure trust and transparency as agentic systems become more and more autonomous?
Yeah. Well, there's two things that we want to do to help with trust and transparency. The first is we have a rigorous set of principles on responsible AI. So for any AI that Microsoft deploys, we adhere to an important set of guidelines, and that's really table stakes. So that's the first piece, responsible AI and our focus there. The second thing that I think is important is we now have an opportunity to start to quantify the value and the impact that many agents will have. And we often will call that in the industry, we'll call that evals or benchmarks. And increasingly, I think we have an opportunity to help our customers understand how agents are being effective in their workplace using these evals and benchmarks on real world problems. So for example, a typical workflow will be a sales leader doing sales research to try to understand like how they might want to organize accounts or territories or reshape planning as they think about the year ahead. We recently released a new benchmark that we call the Sales Research Bench, and it shows how agents can actually help sales leaders in that very specific job, and it's quantified. And so I think you'll start to see more of that. And between following responsible AI standards and then using quantitative measures like evals and benchmarks to understand efficacy, I think we're really on the cusp of helping customers know how they can deploy AI in a safe way for real business results.
Well, thank you, Brian, for sharing with us your insights and kind of look into the future. What's happening with agentic business applications?
Thank you very much.
It's really amazing the pace at which AI has been adopted and continues to evolve. The technology evolves on a near daily basis. But at the same time, organizations have to figure out how they're going to implement their AI strategies and what the business outcomes that they're most important to their business. I think it's very fascinating how Microsoft has approached the market, both from the standpoint of addressing the individual and their productivity, but also thinking about new workflows, new models of business, but doing that with not a set of tools, but a set of capabilities that provide integration with data, process, workflow, and agentic AI. No one knows for sure what the future holds and what an agentic business might really look like. But in situations like today, when we remove constraints of what we can do with technology thanks to AI, that's where the possibilities are created. Using tools like Copilot, using applications like Dynamics 365, and we'll see what end users as well as technologists bring to bear in their ideas and how they reshape businesses for today and tomorrow. I don't know about you, but I'm super excited about the future that we're creating together, thanks to working with technology companies and with end users like yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kurt Kukine. I am Senior Director of AI Marketing for Hammerspace. And joining me on the call today, Sam, if you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Sam Newnham. I run our AI solutions practice here at Hammerspace. We appreciate the time today.
Yeah, really excited to be here with everyone here in the room and online as well. Here's a brief agenda. So I'll be going over a quick recap of just what is Hammerspace, what is the Hammerspace, and what is Hammerspace, and how we do what we do, because it really takes a little bit of time to understand how we're differentiated from the typical storage company out there. We see ourselves much more as a data company. And so it's an important difference, especially with today's workload demands and infrastructure setups. Then I'll kick it over to Sam, and he'll be covering our NVIDIA AI data platform integration and why that extends what Hammerspace does into a whole new arena for folks who are deploying AI factories, and are looking to go from data chaos to AI-ready data. And then finally, I will give an update on the Open Flash platform. We talked to the delegates at a previous field day about OFP and the initiative behind that, and we want to give you an update on practice. And rare for a software company like Hammerspace, I'll even have some hardware to feely touchy. Yeah, it's exciting. And I'll be joined by two folks, Ted and John from Hammerspace, to talk about why they're a key part of the initiative and our first reference design. All right, so the Hammerspace. Probably not so much for the people in the room, maybe a few people in the room haven't gotten this background before, but what is a Hammerspace? Right? And it is that infinite space that you see in an animated show where somebody's carrying a bag and then they maybe pull a giant hammer out of nowhere, right? It's this instantly accessible virtual space that is infinite in size. And so that's a pretty good analogy for what we do for our customers, right? We disaggregate the data from the underlying infrastructure and allow that data to be in any location, in any cloud, on any infrastructure backend, and eliminate the silos that are so common in today's enterprises. And we accelerate pipelines by aggregating the metadata that is attached to all of that data across the data estate, making the infrastructure more valuable because we can continue to use whatever data you have in place and continue to use those systems, but then also rapidly deploy newer, cheaper, faster technology, integrate those really easily into your environment. And with AI being such a big part of where we're generating data today, the need for this massive repository that sits across locations, clouds, and systems is really, really key. So a little bit of, background on AI, right? I don't think this is a question too much anymore, but I think we often focus as vendors on our really cool system, right? And we don't focus so much, especially in the storage space, on just how are people dealing with their data, right? And AI has really driven us as storage players to think differently. And we're not alone in that at Hammerspace, but, really going from where we were just serving files out, serving objects out, into being able to serve something that's really useful for these AI applications, right? We're not just repositories anymore. Now we are really, full data management systems. And what Hammerspace does is go beyond the systems view, right? And we want to give people visibility into all of their data, not just the data sitting on one system. We want to be able to give people access to all the data across locations, give people access to all the data and visibility across their clouds. And we need to be able to automate those data pipelines to provide AI-ready data, not just raw data out the front end. And we need to be able to do that in real time. And so I've covered these problem areas, but I'll dive into each of them a little bit more, right? So storage folks have been deploying systems for all sorts of rational reasons all over the place, right? And each system might have a unique characteristic, right? You might deploy object storage over here because you have this data repository that is going to grow, and you don't want it to, have onerous overhead. You want it to be easy to deploy, scale out. Then you have NAS systems that are scale up, maybe over on another side, because you had more enterprise, requirements for data protection and things like that. And you wanted it easy to share and easy to access for folks that didn't know anything about S3. Then you started deploying pieces in the cloud because there was this infinite bucket in the cloud that allowed you to ship data up there. But each of those new systems introduced complexity, additional data management overhead, all the things that comes along with distributed data. Similarly, you stand up a Western region, you've got another office in the East Coast, you've got another office in Europe, another office in Asia. All of these disconnected sites need to be able to collaborate, especially now that we're applying AI applications to be able to gain better insights into, everything that's spread out across the globe. So how do you unify that without massive migrations and multiple copies spread all over the place? Additionally, we encounter more and more customers.
Bert?
Yes.
Ray Lucchese, Silverton Consulting. You mentioned that you disaggregate data, but you aggregate metadata. You want to kind of...
I will dive deeper into that for sure.
Okay.
But essentially, that is Hammerspace's superpower, all right? So we assimilate the metadata from the underlying storage systems, whether it's an object storage or a NAS system from other system vendors out there. And then we have metadata servers that sit outside the data path that manage all of the data across those systems and aggregate it into a single global namespace. And then we can have data writing to those systems. So you can leave the data in place, or you can move the data based on where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. And you can continue to utilize that underlying system under Hammerspace's ownership.
That assimilation process happens instantaneously? Or
It's of course not
months?
instantaneously. It's a days. It's a days versus month thing. So when
Okay.
you look at, what is a typical system vendor going to come in and tell you is, how are we going to solve this problem? Well, we have the best system. We have the best new silo that's going to solve all your silo problems. So just deploy our system, migrate all your data into our system, and then you have a single global namespace. Instead, we say, leave all your data in place until you need to move it. So yes, there are cases where you're going to have to move your data, and that's, physics. But you don't have to move it all instantaneously. So that's a nice thing that when Hammerspace comes in, we're talking days to be able to stand up a global namespace as opposed to a gigantic migration process into our system. And so you get access to this global namespace really, really quickly. And I talk about that a little bit later in a couple of customer use cases too.
Okay.
So too many storage systems to manage, too many things out there. None of them meet all the needs, right? I mean, as we're approaching, infrastructure modernization, I think what is everybody trying to get to? And that's a single converged infrastructure. You need to be able to serve S3. You need to be able to serve a parallel file system, and then also, NFS, SMB, CSI, MCP. All of these things need to come from a single system, and we do all of that natively. And then we're very, very cloud friendly. We were built as software with a cloud-first mentality, so that to be able to, rather than viewing cloud as a destination where you just spill bits out and then hope that you never need to bring them back because that's a really expensive process, use the cloud as an extension of your on-prem infrastructure, right? And that speaks to, the whole first to cloud type of activity. And we can really help customers with an on-ramp to hybrid cloud settings. And then finally, data management across systems has often been another new tool that you need to bring in. And so instead, we bring data management into the storage layer and help people automate that via orchestration. And I'll go into that here in just a second.
Is Marion Newsom. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So you talked about aggregating the data from the metadata. How do you detect the drift, if there's any, between those two?
I will kick that one over to Sam. Sam, if you're available for a quick.
Yeah, the idea is to prevent data drift, right? It's one of the most poisonous things that happens in AI. So by owning the metadata, right, by separating that particular thing, we synchronize those changes real time, right, across our global namespace. And so we don't have some of that acknowledgement, wait for this to write type situation. And that's part of our secret sauce is how we can resolve some of those discrepancies in multi-writer situations and those types of things as well. But our system was tuned to deal with this for Studio in the Sky, where we're doing multi-editing, right? Where we're doing AI pipelines, where data needs to live in multiple places but stay in sync. And so the beauty of that is that by separating metadata, we know those changes can happen instantaneously while we deal with the payload of those files moving to those geographic locations. So we can actually do, say, a LS on both sides of the world, see everything perfectly, but the data may still be in transit from a physical standpoint.
Thank you.
So one other emerging problem that we've got in real time is dealing with flash memory, right? And there's currently a pretty tight market for flash memory, whereas maybe a year ago, storage vendors were out there saying, oh, disk is dead. Well, now that nobody can actually buy flash, or flash is going up 2x in price because of this really tight market, we've got issues, right? And so if you can't even acquire new flash, but you still need high performance storage, what do? Right? And, there's all sorts of ways that the system vendors are going about this. Let's go out and do a buyback program so we can get some more flash in and then resell that to other customers. I think it's a pretty, I don't want to make light of the situation because it's a pretty dire situation for customers who really, really need that capacity. But our view is that there is actually underutilized flash storage probably out there in many environments, right? You've stood up these multiple systems. They're all disconnected. They have an application running on system 1. You have application B running on system 2, application C, and all of those consumption patterns are not the same. So if you can aggregate those systems and use orchestration to make sure the right data is sitting on the right tier of storage, then you can free up some flash space within your environment. You can make sure you're utilizing all of that flash space, that it's already sitting there within the systems you have. We also have the capability, and we talked about it at the last field day presentation, a relatively new one that was introduced about 8 months ago, and that's tier 0. So that's the ability to consume the flash that's within the compute cluster, CPU and GPU clusters, and aggregate that within our namespace. And so we set that up as a tier 0. It's a extra high performance tier because you eliminate all of the network latency. And that's the flash that's sitting in the GPU and CPU servers. And we can incorporate that as part of the namespace and utilize that as a tier of very, very high performance storage. And if you look at most of the GPU and CPU clusters out there, they do have underutilized local flash storage that we can access and add to the global data file system. And then finally, I mentioned this already, but treat cloud as an extension of the infrastructure, not a destination. So, right, the cloud vendors have pretty good allocations of flash storage. So they aren't running into just availability problems. Now, probably not cheap, but at least you have access to that cloud instance, and you can treat that as an extension of your namespace that's both on-prem and in the cloud. So how do we do it? So you can deploy Hammerspace. It's software defined. We do have reference architectures and look for more news coming soon on other ways to deploy Hammerspace. But we can deploy on virtually any server in front of any storage, including local NVMe, as well as anywhere, right, within an environment. So data in place assimilation. Here was Ray's question, right? So data stays in place and we assimilate the metadata into our Anvil server. I'll have a little diagram of that here soon. And data is visible to users within minutes, right? So again, we're not doing an onerous long-term migration process. We're assimilating that data in place, and then users see everything that they're authorized to use. And from there, we provide a parallel file system access to a cluster or standard S3, NFS, SMB access to other clients that are, heterogeneous within the environment. And so we can accelerate data that has been sitting on legacy file systems or object storage that's not tuned for high performance workloads that the GPUs demand, while also managing all of that storage underneath. And then finally, right, I think the most important point here, and the thing that we are going to exploit when we talk about the AIDP integration with NVIDIA, is all of the automated orchestration that we can do underneath the scenes, right? So as Sam mentioned, we can move data, right, across locations, between systems, even doing so while it's being written to. And we can set up policies based on normal business language that allow people to tier their storage as necessary based on their individual requirements.
Hey, Kurt, it's Ray Lucchese, Silverton Consulting. You mentioned earlier MCP. Do you provide MCP server for agents to be able to move the data based on where they think they might need it, things of that nature?
We do. And so Sam, that's exactly what Sam's going to be talking about with our AIDP solution. So that's where it really turns into something truly, I think, mind-blowing, where you go from this really, complicated management schema. And, none of this is easy. Right? I don't want to make it sound like, under the covers, everything is super seamless, right? But we go from something that, takes some storage management and storage intuition and experience, and are able to turn it into basically a system that can interact with you via natural language. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So here are the building blocks, right, of the Hammerspace deployment. So you've got the metadata control plane with the Anvil servers, and then essentially the data service nodes. And those are the things that provide file access as well as do the data movement. And so we can use PNFS, right, v4.2, which is integrated into every current Linux version that's out there today, for folks to do high performance parallel file system access to the data within a Hammerspace namespace, as well, again, as your standard multi-protocol file and object access for folks who are doing heterogeneous clients, for all sorts of.
Talk a little bit about how you cluster these various different types of nodes as well. I mean, I assume that you have some way of clustering them so there's redundancy and,
Yeah, Sam, you want to?
remote availability.
Yeah, exactly. There's HA and durability, right, built into the architecture of these platforms. And so part of this thing, kind of like a ring architecture, right? And so part of those anvils will live at each side, right, controlling local metadata and the storage that's there. And those, are then replicated at other areas in those particular sites, right? And so that's kind of how Kurt talked about how we do this out of band, right? But yeah, we cover all sorts of reliability and durability, right? Up to 99.999, however far we get in that particular architecture, right? Like most systems, are always a trade-off between, how transient's that data, how much do we care, where do we want to do, especially with cloud resources. But our architecture is fully redundant across the entire platform.
I guess, follow on to Andy's question. So the redundancy, so some storage systems have redundancy built in, some do not. You're talking, I assume, about the Anvil metadata being redundant. I understand how that would be completely under your control, but let's say I have some dumb server storage and I want to have some sort of high availability for that. Do you provide, I guess I'd call it external RAID across?
Yeah, so we do erasure coding across those, we can do it across storage systems, right, to provide redundancy for the data.
Yeah, the other point real quick is that all this is done via policy and orchestration. So by share, right? So not even by storage box, right? But by share, by data type, we can choose to keep multiple copies of that data spread across different geographic locations, or to Kurt's point, whether it's erasure coded or whether it's stored locally across a handful of servers. So we've got a lot of flexibility in how we do that, very granular, right? So it doesn't even have to be a master policy. We can do that specific to projects, specific to shares, or specific to organizations.
Yeah, my question was more specifically how you handled the cluster of your metadata nodes, and I think that you answered it adequately. They're fully resilient. If you lose any one of them, you're still fine.
Correct. Yeah. Today they're in an HA pair. We're changing that to be fully containerized and scale out. So we'll be able to add performance as we add containers. Same with the DSX, right? Those data movers and some of those components, right? We can scale those today. In fact, we already have some customers that do an early access in that containerized format. But today it's HA, but to your point, that's fully replicated across our environment.
The Marion Newsom. I have a question. How do you prevent privileged access on those different sets of data?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How do you keep the privileged access the same across those different sets of data, like the S3?
No,
Was-
exactly. So this is kind of the beauty of a single namespace, right? Is that right now those are all managed silos, right? We see people sometimes do direct permissions into an individual NAS, Active Directory, those sorts of things. By actually tying those directory systems into our platform, we inherit those default permissions, right? So that's part of understanding the POSIX landscape perfectly. So we can pull those particular things in, but and I'll talk about this in my section a little bit, but the beauty is what we're aiming for, right? Is that security isn't tied now to where data is born, that security can now follow that data. And that's the beauty of separating the metadata from the storage itself, is that now those permissions can follow that data, whether they live in the cloud, live on a different storage platform, etc. And so we move that security plane into our metadata global namespace realm.
And so if I'm a company with cross-border data concerns or AI regulations, that's what that solution will provide.
Exactly. We can set up all sorts of policies, whether it's GDPR to prevent things cross country, whether it's certain patent information. We can do some custom metadata tagging. In fact, we're actually doing some integration with some digital security posture management companies and stuff as well, right? That take even our file system attributes well beyond that to be able to really control at a granular level what data should or should not live in certain places.
If I'm ever audited, could I ever see the logs to that?
I'm sorry.
If I get audited, can I pull the logs from my regulators?
Correct. Yeah, the whole thing is fully audited, right? Where files have moved, who's accessed everything. That entire premise is built into our solution.
Thank you.
And I think there was an important point that Sam made there that maybe have been lost and I hadn't mentioned yet. And that is, we definitely go well beyond a storage system in terms of the amount and the type of metadata that you can attach to any object within our global namespace. So that allows you to take additional steps, right, based on business rules to be able to interact with that metadata. So it's not just, your POSIX metadata of file create and permissions and things like that, but you can attach other attributes onto that data, which again becomes important when you get to managing a system for AI. I'm going to go through this quickly here, just so we can jump over to the next section. But I want to talk a little bit about how our customers are using Hammerspace today. Here's an example of a large digital payments company. And they had a team of about 3,000 data scientists and research engineers who are building AI applications. And they were looking to move off of their fairly expensive, up for renewal NAS systems, and they wanted to deploy object storage, cheap and deep storage, cheap and wide storage, I guess, for their data scientists. And they started this process and then figured out that, our data scientists don't speak S3. They speak NFS. So what do we do here, right? And, there's systems that you can put a bridge in front of an object storage. Those are integrated to more or less extent, but typically don't provide you very good performance when you're accessing that object storage through some kind of gateway. But instead, with Hammerspace, right, we can put that in front of the object storage, still take advantage of that scale-out architecture, but now provide parallel file system access for a cluster, as well as all of the other access protocols natively, right? And so we also extended then into GCP so that they had burstable capacity for additional GPUs when and if they need them, as well as now a fully tiered environment that was NVMe for tier 1 storage, and then this object storage on the back end and cloud as needed, reducing storage costs. Their renewal license basically came down by $5 million. The other thing is now their users are only looking for the data in a single place, right? They aren't looking across file systems, across object storage. It's a single global namespace, no matter where the data lives. Greatly simplifies their workflows. And now they have agility to be able to utilize both on-prem and cloud resources. Here's another customer who ran into the performance issue, right? They were looking to deploy this new set of NVIDIA servers that now demanded, 3-4x the performance that they had been providing from their storage systems. But they weren't looking to, up their storage by 3 to 4x. So instead of buying a bunch more storage systems, or perhaps, some kind of bespoke parallel file system solution, right? They brought in Hammerspace. We could still continue to leverage the systems that they had invested in, their NAS systems. So those stay in place, can be used both with data in place and then also as an extra archive tier. And then we deployed our own NVMe storage behind. So I did want to emphasize that we don't just use other people's storage as a backend. We can deploy our own storage as well. So we do have storage boxes to be able to support customers in their deployments, and that's just standard commodity-based storage servers.
Yeah. Frederick van Haren from High Fence Consulting. So I do definitely see the value on the training side, with the metadata being available all over the place, but your data might be delayed. How does that work for inference? Do you see the product working well on inference, considering that your data might be slightly delayed? Where we talk about a little bit latency, where on the inference side, latency is kind of a key factor.
Yeah, I think, I guess fundamentally, what are you changing from data being remote or local, in the situation, right? We are going to bring the data as close as possible to the GPU, right? For, again, under the covers, can do that based on policy. As a object is, accessed, we can then bring the entire project into the local NVMe. So I don't think we're necessarily at a disadvantage. Yes, if you had migrated all of your data into a bespoke file system, right, and then connected that up to your GPUs, then yes, but I think then you're looking at a massive one-time migration, which takes time, right? So it depends on where you want to spend your time.
So if I understand it correctly, there is a way to create a profile where you kind of preload the data.
So Sam will talk about that.
Okay.
Here in just.
Frederick, we can spend some more time over this. We do have a number of customers that are using us for global inference, right? So when they're using tier 0 for incredibly fast performance, right? Holding model repositories, information that's been created. We then use a bunch of policies to drag that back, right? To continue to do some fine tuning or some updates of those things. But they also use us to sync vector database information and those sorts of things. And at that point, we're up against the speed of light problem, right? But they still find value in the fact that this all happens through policy and automation rather than this like spray and RC problem they've been running against. So I can show you a couple of designs where we're helping those particular inference farms, especially when they're trying to your point, keep latency low by moving inference close to the user, but still keeping data sets intact, right, across those particular farms.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm going to skip over this slide. It's what we do. We're helping tame the data chaos with a single unified global namespace. Now you'll notice here, right, I'm just talking about the unified namespace plugging into an AI factory. But there's an important part of the prep and rest of the data flow or the pipeline, right, for AI data that maybe we hadn't touched in the past. And that is getting data truly AI ready, right? We were a storage system that provided data, raw data at the front end. Now with AIDP, we're truly unlocking all of the value that is within the data.